When you buy a house, there are a ton of decisions that you want to get right. Whether that's how much to put down, how much you can afford, or what mortgage option to pick, all of those are really important decisions that you want to get right. Buying a house is a really important decision that many of my clients have faced, and getting the mortgage option right is something that we always talk about. So let's start to walk through the various options that you have. The first one that everybody knows about is your standard fixed mortgage. There's either a 30-year mortgage, there's 15-year mortgage, and sometimes there's even 20-year fixed mortgages. So which one makes the most sense for you? Well, there's a bunch of variables to think about here. Typically, if you go with a 15-year mortgage versus 20 or 30, that's going to come with less interest, which means that you're going to pay less interest over the time, but it's also going to have a lower interest rate. Why? A lot of times they feel like lower length mortgages have a little bit less risk. So potentially you might, instead of getting a 7% on a 30-year, you could get 6.5% on a 15-year. The reason why I don't like 15-year mortgages over 30-year mortgages is because you don't really have the choice to pay it down slower. So let's say you decide it makes sense for you to start a business and you realize, oh my gosh, my mortgage is way too much of a monthly cost to be able to start the business. I wish I could pay less. Well, you don't really have that option. A lot of people say, hey, well, you can go refinance that mortgage. That's a really great idea, except for if you have a 3% mortgage from 2020, right now you'd be refinancing to about a 7% mortgage, and you probably wouldn't even be saving much on a monthly basis. But you know what you can do with a 30-year mortgage? You could pay it off in 15 years if you really wanted to. Yes, you're gonna end up paying a little bit more in interest because you're gonna have a slightly higher interest rate, but to me, I would much rather pay slightly more over 30 years to have the flexibility to scale back if I need to, but also have the ability to pay more if I want to. So for me, I typically lean on 30-year mortgages just because of the added flexibility. Plus, you're also going to be paying down the principal. Another type is an adjustable rate mortgage, or an ARM. A lot of times people see these, they have a 3-year, a 5-year, or a 7-year ARM. Really what that means is that you have a fixed mortgage for that time period. So let's say you got one right now because if you put 20% down, it said that you can get a lower interest rate, so you choose a 5-year ARM. What that means is for the next 5 years, that mortgage is going to stay the same. It's going to have the same interest rate. But at the end of 5 years, you're going to basically have to go look at what the new interest rate in the market is, which could potentially be a lot higher. Typically, I say that it doesn't really make any sense to use ARMs. Sometimes today, for people, they do choose to do that. Why? Because we're in a really high interest rate environment, and a lot of people predict that 3, 5, 7 years from now, we're going to have a lower rate. And so they'll take the lower rate for this time and then look to refinance down the line. But understand that this is a risk. We don't know for sure that interest rates are going to go down. Interest rates could potentially go up, even though it seems unlikely. So that's the risk that you face. But I would say it's a lot more likely that this can be a better decision than it was when rates were 3%. I've worked with a lot of people who picked adjustable rate mortgages in 2020 and now are really regretting it, knowing that, hey, they're going to come up in the next 1 to 2 years and that interest rate might potentially even double. The third option is really interest-only loan. This is one that I don't really suggest often. Some people like it. And what an interest rate or an interest only loan is basically that you're only paying the interest. So if you have $1 million loan at 7%, there's $70,000 of interest. Well, then you're going to only pay that interest. Typically, these are variable interest rates, so you do run the risk of this changing a lot over time. But this is another option some people pick. The reason why they pick that is they say, hey, I don't know if I'm going to live here for much more than 5 to 7 years. And in that time period, I'm barely going to pay down any principal anyways. So I might as well just let the appreciation of the house be the equity that I build. But again, that works really well in the past few years when houses were really growing. But in general, houses are only growing at 3 to 4% a year. And so you're not going to be building very much equity. And plus you run the risk of interest rates changing and that payment drastically going up. And that one, I almost view it as renting, except for you do have some appreciation that can come down the line. So really you have fixed rate mortgages, you have interest only mortgages, and then you have adjustable rate mortgages. You really want to think about this and make sure you're making the best decision for you. But again, typically I like a 30-year fixed mortgage. It gives you the flexibility. You lock in the rate. You can refinance down the line if rates do drop, but at least you understand, hey, this is basically the payment that I have. The other thing that people forget though is in a 30-year mortgage, your payment's going to stay the same. In the beginning, you're going to be paying mostly interest, a little bit of principal, and then over time, it's going to start paying more towards principal just as the principal goes down and the loan is a little bit smaller. But what you really have to remember is that if you're paying $3,000 a month today, in 20 years, $3,000 a month is significantly less. So when you're locking in a mortgage, you're locking in a fixed payment, and every year it's technically becoming cheaper to you. And so if you have a low rate, a lot of times it doesn't make sense to pay it off quicker unless you are somebody that really hates debt and that you can't sleep at night. But hopefully this was enough info to help you understand the various options you have and really think through what might make the most sense for you. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and go subscribe to my channel for more personal finance content. And as always, please leave your thoughts in the comments below, and I promise to get back to every single one of them. We'll see you back next week.